Good day everyone. For today, I'll be talking about the cardiovascular system of the body of an animal. So pag-uusapan natin dito yung different processes involved in the circulation of the blood throughout the body, and then the different parts of it like yung heart, the blood, of course, and then the blood vessels. Okay? So this is only a refresher topic para lang maalala nyo ulit yung mga topics under this system when you were in high school pa during your general science. So here, before we proceed, let's try to define first what is cardiology and hematology. So when we say cardiology, basically this is a branch of physiology that deals with the study of cardiovascular illness, that care of all things that are related to one of the most important parts in this system, which is the heart. And at the same time, with the other parts of it, which I will discuss it later on. Then what is hematology? When we say hematology naman, this is the study of the blood. Okay, so the blood-forming tissues, and eventually any blood disorders from the animal's body. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Pag cardiology sa heart, pag hematology, it is about the blood. Now, before we proceed to the functions of this system, let's try to extract first this word cardiovascular. Okay, so cardiovascular came from two words. Yung cardio means the heart, and then the vascular, it is the blood vessels. So definitely when we say cardiovascular system, this consists mainly of three components, as I have said a while back, which I will discuss it later on. The blood, the heart, and of course, the blood vessels. Now, going back to the slide, what are the functions of the cardiovascular system? What are the main responsibilities in the body of animals? So first, it says here that it distributes blood all throughout the body of the animal. So basically, yung circulation na nito for the absorption of nutrients in the body of the animal. Then second, this is connected to the first function, which is to remove the waste from the body. So definitely from the blood streams of the body, doon maita-transport yung mga excreted wastes in the help of another system, which is the excretory system. Then another one is it mounts the immune responses to infection. Okay? So papaano to? Definitely, kumbaga, it fights foreign materials or objects or even substances and organisms that invade the body of the animal through the action of disease-fighting elements of the immune system, such as ano na yung cells ulit na responsible or pinaka-common sa inyo when it comes to cardiovascular system, that it's responsible for the protection or pag nasugatan yung animal. If there is any foreign materials or foreign objects na nag-i-invade sa body ng animal, it is the WBCs or the white blood cells. Okay? So malaking tulong ang cardiovascular system for this function. Then another one, this system is also responsible in aiding body temperature regulation. So this is with the help, of course, of one nutrient na kinokonsume ng body ng animal, which is the water. Okay? So since ang main function nito, as I have said a while back, is to distribute or transport blood throughout the body, dun din mangyayari yung pag-carry out niya ng oxygen from the lungs to the tissues. Kasi di ba we secrete oxygen, and ano ang nagsisecrete it? It is the lungs. So yung oxygen coming from the lungs, which the animal's body needed it, this system will eventually carry out. Ganon din sa carbon dioxide. So from the tissues to the lungs. Kasi carbon dioxide naman yung ini-excrete ng katawan ng animal. Okay? So this is the same to our body as humans, and eventually this is the same process sa mga hormones na pinoproduce ng different endocrine glands, which I have discussed this one naman na in the endocrine system. Now what about for blood clotting? Ano naman yung main function dito? Bakit kaya kasama? Okay? So dito, for example, in case of injury, pag nasugatan yung animals natin or nagkaroon ng bleeding, this system will eventually release yung clotting cells and proteins doon sa open wound or the affected site, which quickly stops the bleeding and promotes the healing process. Kaya kung mapapansin ninyo, if nagkasugat kayo, then eventually after a couple of minutes, nag-stop yung bleeding. Definitely your cardiovascular system has responded from the bleeding. Okay? So importante din tong responsibility na ito ni cardiovascular system. Then moving forward, we now proceed to one of the major components of this system, which is the heart. So let's try to have a look about the anatomy of the heart. So definitely, di ba, nung bata pa kayo, sabi ng iba noon is kung gaano kalaki yung fist mo, okay, ganun din kalaki yung heart mo. Kasi basically, this is a fist-sized muscular organ, or in the other hand, this is a cone-shaped muscular structure and considered to be the engine of the system as it pumps blood to the circulatory system. So it usually consists of pericardium as well as its three layers, the epi, myo, and then the endocardiums. Now, what is this pericardium na tinatawag? So yung pinaka-outer membrane, no? Yung pinaka-outer membrane that surrounds the heart itself ay pericardium ang tawag. Okay, so since ang heart ay delicate muscular structure, so definitely dapat itong nagproprotekta dito is should be tough, no, and inelastic. Okay, then for the three layers, the epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium, pag sinabi natin na epicardium, within the wall of the heart. Okay, based from the picture that is being shown to this slide, the epicardium is the outermost layer which consists ng maninipis and transparent layer ng mga connective tissues. Then after the epicardium, we have the middle layer, which is the myocardium, which is ito yung tinatawag natin na cardiac muscle. Kasi this layer makes up the bulk of the heart, or yung majority part ng heart ay within the middle layer. The next one, we have the endocardium, which is the innermost part naman, na like from the epicardium, this consists also of thin layers ng mga connective tissues. Bakit thin connective tissues kaya? Para makapag-provide to ng smooth na lining sa mga chambers ng heart and even sa mga valves. So those are the different layers of the heart. Now we move to the four chambers naman, which is the left and right atrium and then the left and right ventricles. So ano yung different functions ng mga to? Just to refreshen your minds, pag atrium, basically this receive blood and pump it into the ventricles. But to precisely indicate yung independent responsibilities nito, pag right atrium, no? Pag right atrium siya yung nagre-receive ng blood into the heart from the body and veins. Pag left atrium naman, ganun pa din, nagre-receive siya ng blood into the heart but from the lungs. Okay? Now what about for ventricles? Pag ventricles naman, this usually pumps the blood away from the heart. Okay? So pag atrium receive blood, pag ventricles, it pumps blood. So pag right ventricle, it pumps out blood into the lungs, but for the left ventricle, it pumps blood out into the body via the help of the arteries. Okay? So I hope naintindihan ninyo ang pagkakaiba ng four chambers na to. Now we move to the operations of the heart valve. Etong sinasabi dito na atrioventricular valve. So etong sinasabi dito na atrioventricular valve, this usually lies between the atrium and ventricles. Okay? So ito yung nagse-separate from the left and right side of the heart. So ang main role nito is it prevents the backflow of blood from the ventricle to the atrium during ventricular systole. Kasi definitely if you recall, ang ventricles, it pumps out the blood. So ano ang ventricular systole? When we say this is actually a part of the cardiac cycle. So ang nangyayari dito is when the atria are relaxed, no? Pag yung atrium ay relaxed, the ventricles will eventually contract. Okay, so we have two valves from here, the tricuspid valve, which is the valve on the right side, and then the bicuspid valve, which is on the left side. Now with the aortic valve and pulmonary valves, this usually prevents naman the backflow of blood from the blood vessels such as the aorta and pulmonary artery into the ventricles during diastole. So the systole and diastole na terms na nakikita ninyo dito, I will be going to explain it furtherly on the next slide since importante siya on the cardiac cycle. So we have the cardiac cycle. So when we see cardiac cycle, this is the sequence of events that occurs during one complete heartbeat ng animal. Or in the other hand, ito yung complete cycle of cardiac contraction and relaxation. So hanggang dito lang tayo kasi masyadong deep na if we go further on it. Now what are these two terms? Ano yung kinalaman ng mga to in the cardiac cycle? So basing from the definition of it ng cardiac cycle, when we say systole, this is the contraction period ng heart. So so ang nangyayari dito is the ventricles will begin to have contraction. Now what will happen next? So since nag-contract yung ventricles, the blood pressure will eventually increases also. So parang pag systole, this is the contraction of a chamber of a heart that drives blood out of the chamber. Now for the diastole, which is relaxation, in contrast lang sila in systole. It is the relaxation naman ng chamber ng heart just prior to and during the filling out of that chamber. Basta tatandaan ninyo, pag systole, contraction, pag diastole, relaxation. Okay? Then next we move to the second major component ng cardiovascular system, which are the blood vessels. So for the blood vessels, there are three major types. We have the arteries, the veins, and then the capillaries. But in other references, ginagawa nilang 5. So we can include etong arterioles and then the venules. So let's have first this one. So pag sinabi nating arteries and arterioles, they are usually tubular structures based from the photo in this slide that carry blood away from the heart. But to give you a more defined instance in the with this, pag arteries, they usually carry the blood away from the heart, and usually the blood carried by these blood vessels are oxygenated blood. Okay, and of course, since oxygenated, it usually appears bright red in color, which means it is rich with oxygen. Okay? Pag aorta naman, this is the largest artery in the body of the animal. Now for the arterioles, this is a part or it is connected, no? It is connected in the to the artery, but these are usually smaller branches of which this part delivers the blood into the capillaries. Okay? So yun yung ginagawa ng arteries. What about for the veins? So if the arteries are away from the heart, the veins usually carry blood back to the heart naman. So these blood vessels convey blood from tissues back to the heart. And pag sa arteries, they are oxygenated. Dito, they carry the oxygenated blood. Kaya it usually appears dark red in color since it is low in oxygen. And definitely, pag mababa yung oxygen, in contrast, mataas din yung carbon dioxide. Now, when we say vena cava, these are the two largest veins in the animal's body. And pag venules, just like the arterioles, these are smaller veins also that usually collect blood from the capillaries and delivers it into the vein. So yun ang ginagawa ng venules. Now, for the capillaries, which is also called as the exchange vessel, no? These are the smallest blood vessels in the body of the animal. So they are tiny links between the arteries and the veins where oxygen and nutrients diffuse to body tissues. And also, they are responsible in the removal of carbon dioxide and metabolic wastes from the body of the animal. So those are the different blood vessels. Now we move to the last major component of this system, which is the blood. So it says here that blood is a thick suspension of cellular elements in an aqueous solution of electrolytes and some non-electrolytes. So definitely ang nagiging function ng blood ay for transportation, regulation, and even protection. Okay? So major na function to ng blood, tatlo. Transportation, regulation, and then protection. So in transportation, we recall yung functions ng main functions ng cardiovascular system. As I've said kanina, no? This typically transports oxygen and carbon dioxide between the lungs and the tissues. So in addition, the blood also transports absorbed nutrients from the gastrointestinal tract to the liver and other cells. And eventually, as I have said a while back, hormones also from the endocrine glands to the target cells. Also with waste products from cells to excretory sites, including yung liver, the kidney, and skin. And since regulation, sabi ko kanina, it usually transports heat din all throughout the body. Okay? Nagtra-transport din siya ng init sa katawan ng animal. Now, what about for protection? So the blood usually, as I've said, I'll go back again sa main function ng cardiovascular system, which I discussed a while back. The blood usually plays many roles in immunity. And later on, you will know that some blood cells are phagocytic. And yung iba ay usually it produces antibodies. So the blood helps in maintaining homeostasis by clotting to prevent blood loss. Now we have the different types of blood, the plasma and then the blood cells. So etong blood cells, these are usually the red blood cells, then the white blood cells and platelets. So let's try to extract them one by one. Now, when we see red blood cells or the erythrocytes, so these are usually biconcave discs and being manufactured sa bone marrow ng animal. And eventually, these carry the oxygen which is being transported all throughout the body of the animal. So etong mga cells na to ay usually flexible para they can be able to deform in order to move through capillaries and to give you an insight since this is a cell. And going back to the different parts of a cell, etong RBC ay walang nucleus and organelles. Pero this is sa mga mammals na animals. But for the avian species or yung mga poultry species natin, they usually do have nucleus. Now, the question is, paano makakapag-transport ang RBC ng oxygen? So this is being helped with the aid of hemoglobin. So this is an iron conjugated protein that helps in the transportation ng oxygen sa body ng animal. Also, aside from that, although di ko na ilagay dito, yung RBC ay nagde-deliver din ng oxygen to other cells and it aids in the removal of carbon dioxide, which is a waste product from the body of the animal. And to give you an insight, the RBCs that are being produced will certainly be replaced and live only for around 4 months or 120 days. Next, we have the WBC or the white blood cells or the leukocytes, which are the only blood cells that can be considered as complete cells since they contain yung nucleus and organelles. Unlike sa RBC kanina na hindi. And also, they do not contain hemoglobin na for the RBC meron siyang hemoglobin content. So they usually responsible for the defense or protection of the body. So they usually protect the body against disease and foreign materials. And as a fact, they usually protect, they are being produced and usually protected only in the stem cells of the bone marrow in response to infection. Kaya medyo mababa yung survival life nila, which is around 2 weeks. And usually pag nagde-detect tayo ng illness ng animals and even sa tao, and if we perform laboratory tests, pag mataas yung white blood cells, doon tayo mag-start to diagnose a disease or illness. Kasi as I have said, nabubuo lang ang mga to pag may infection sa katawan ng animal. Now, we do have 2 types of white blood cells. the granulocytes, and then the agranulocytes. And siya nga pala, ang WBC pala, it accounts for around 1% lamang ng blood volume sa katawan ng animal. Now, going back to the granulocytes, we have the three, the neutrophil, which accounts around 50 to 70% of the WBCs, and twice na mas malaki siya kesa sa erythrocytes or the red blood cells. Now for the eosinophils, these are around 2 to 4% only from the WBC's content, of which ang ginagawa nila is they function against parasitic worms. Okay. Then lastly, we have the basophils, which are around 0.5 to 1% lang sa kabuuan ng WBCs, of which ito yung pinaka-rare, no? Pinaka-rare sa lahat ng WBCs natin. Then we move to the second type, which are the agranulocytes. First is the lymphocytes, which accounts for around 25% naman ng WBCs. And ang pinaka-main na function niya dito is pag sinabi natin na lymphocytes, this is the production, or it functions for the production of antibodies against toxins, no? Mga toxicity sa katawan ng animal. Then lastly, we have the monocytes, which are, pag sinabi natin na monocytes, these are, as you could observe it here, these are ovoid or kidney-shaped, no, in size, and accounts for around 3 to 8% lang ng WBC. So those are the white blood cells. Now we move to the platelets, so which are one of the important aspects also when there is bleeding. Okay? Kasi ang ginagawa ng platelets ay pag nagkaroon ng breakage or the blood vessel walls are being damaged, so kumbaga nagka-injury yung animals, as you could observe in the picture, yung mga platelets will eventually block, no, will eventually block the open area ng blood vessel wall na nasira para magkaroon ng clotting, para hindi maubusan ng blood yung animal. Kasi if the platelets ay mababa, doon nagkakaroon ng komplikasyon sa katawan ng animal. Then we have the second part of the blood. Pag yung isa kanina are the blood cells, for this time, which is the plasma. So dito, the plasma consists around 90% water. So this is a fluid portion which consists 90% of water. And dito, from the 90%, it contains the following. Just look at it, your handout. It contains some nutrients, gases, which are the carbon dioxide, the oxygen, and such. And then hormones, electrolytes, and even proteins. So definitely, based from the picture, it is yellowish in color, and basically it accounts the larger or the largest number of distribution sa content mismo ng buong dugo ng animal. So those are the different components of the cardiovascular system. Now to add up itong system na to, we do have the different circulatory systems. When we see, we have the two, the pulmonary and then the systemic circulation. So when we see pulmonary circulation within the body of the animal, ang ginagawa dito is it transports the oxygenated blood from the right ventricle, no, from the right ventricle to the lungs, where it picks up oxygen while delivering carbon dioxide. So the oxygenated blood returning from the body will enter the right atrium, no, and then from the right atrium, it passes into the right ventricle. Now the right ventricle, as I have said a while back, pag ventricles, it pumps out blood. So the right ventricle pumps the blood into the pulmonary artery, no, and into the pulmonary capillaries. Now yung oxygenated blood, it will be returned to the left atrium, no, it will be returned to the left atrium via the pulmonary veins. Pag systemic circulation naman, it distributes oxygenated blood throughout the body of the animal. So the blood is being pumped out from the left ventricle into the aorta and then into smaller na systemic na arteries. So that's it. Pag Pulmonary system, from deoxygenated to oxygenated blood. Pag systemic oxygenated blood, that is being transported all throughout the body. Okay, so that's it, a short discussion about the circulation in the cardiovascular system. So this ends now my discussion, and I hope you have refreshed your minds about this system. Thank you for listening.